count dollars for a living. Now I stack records to the ceiling, dodging all these villains, never catching feelings. Catch me in the wave, best believe I'm chilling. Yo, my father told me better, so I'm never chasing cheddar, never chasing greed. Get up on your knees, I'ma need you to pray better. Think you flying higher than every person at Coachella. Please could you stop it? Every time you spit a line, you be thinking about them profits, thinking about deposits, forget about the process. Focus on your mind and close both eyelids. Yo, you need to turn the lies and vocalize these potent lies. Why you telling lies, selling pies in the skies? You a snake in the skies and I despise it. Hope you drop it. Use your brain, don't you know you got logic? Yeah. Yo, use your brain, don't you know you got logic?
Your frontal lobe, don't be dumb.
Use your brain, don't you know you got logic?
Yeah. Your frontal lobe.
Use your brain, don't you know you got logic? I'll be tripping, never winning, always sitting. My ascension just beginning, and I'm feeling independent, yeah. And I'm feeling independent, yeah. Found myself in the low space, young black man with a court case. Feeling no last rat race. How pussy live, safe face, but I'm day to day till I fade away. Take the pain away, just skate away. Living off 808s, can't really smile, gotta cape my face. Been sad for a while, so new day. On top of my cane like a toothpaste. Spin these fine like a toothpaste. Don't sleep on the spot for it's too late. Hard to fade away, left hand with the J. I'ma save the day, maybe paid away. I be tripping, never winning, always sitting. My ascension just beginning, and I'm feeling independent, yeah. And I'm feeling independent, yeah.
Like that. If we tell these niggas
You are now tuned in to the Cosmic Convos podcast, your number one source for accurate, relevant, and thought-provoking astrological conversations in the podcast nation. The place where stars and minds align.
Peace, you are now tuned into the Cosmic Convos podcast. I'm your humble host, Herut, and I got my good brother here, Brother Ra. How you doing?
Oh, brother, you know, keeping my eyes to the sky, my ears to the street. How about yourself, brother?
No complaints, man. No complaints. Just, trying to get better every day in the day. And like I said last time, trying to learn, from the past and, build a great present and an even better future.
Brother, that is exactly what you're doing, especially with this new movie about to pop. So we excited.
Oh, man, it's coming, man. It's coming indeed, man. Indeed. But before we get too far, I want to remind you all that this episode is brought to you by Pushing Forward Media Group, Calaprucia Astrology, and our good people over there on Patreon. Big up to the patrons out there, man. Definitely appreciate you all checking in and asking questions and making the contributions that you make or whatnot. So we definitely appreciate you all. As usual, if you want to follow us on Instagram, you can follow us at Cosmic Convo. That's CosmicConvo on Instagram. You can find Push It Forward Media on Push It Forward, PUSHITFWD on Instagram and at pushitforward.com. from there, all the social media, we got, the link trees and stuff like that, so you can get to every platform that we're sitting on and everything like that. And, all the various services and different things like that, you can get to us from there. Brother Rob, how can the people get a hold of you?
Uh, Facebook, IG, even Bigo, right? You can even hit me up on Bigo now. All of them are
Indeed.
Shekhem, right? So IG, Facebook, Bigo, Shekhem Ra, Kalaprusha Astrology at Gmail is the email. So definitely ring my bell. But yeah, check me out on Bigo too. I'm on there a few times a week. I pop in and out. I'll drop a few gems and then see what the people do. So all platforms are trying. We're trying to cover all platforms. So only one we can't do is TikTok. And if we could do it, if I could do it on there, I'd be there too. So definitely do that.
To that point, like I said, we I definitely been on Clubhouse or whatnot, and so you could definitely follow me on Clubhouse and stuff like that. You can find me at just Herut, Herut on Clubhouse or whatnot. So I'll be having rooms and collaborating with other people in different rooms and stuff like that. So definitely check me out there, because you're gonna see some more cosmic convos related things happening on Clubhouse as well. I think it's a great platform or whatnot. So definitely check us out there. And on the Bigo platform as well or whatnot. So, we are good there or whatnot. One other thing, I want to remind you all to make sure you like and subscribe and share this to whatever platform that you're on. If you're listening on Apple, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, or you're on Google Play or Stitcher, that's another one out there, Spotify, iHeart. Make sure you share this with people or whatnot, so we can spread the word and get those algorithms moving in our favor, and take this to the next level. Because you gotta realize, man, there's only a handful of black sidereal astrologers out there. It ain't that many of them. Seriously, I mean, like, it sounds crazy. I mean, but it's not that many of them. So we're a rare breed. So if you get benefit from this, and you're really vibing with the sidereal system, and and in particular Vedic astrology and stuff like that, Jyotish, let's make this thing, let's put this thing out there, so the people can get a hold of it and start learning it and start, making this the new paradigm or whatnot. We have people talking about their ascendants, their ascendant sign instead of their sun signs, and different things like that, or whatnot. So let's go ahead and do that or whatnot. But for this episode, we're on episode 16 of season 3. That will make us at episode 66. Indeed, it's like, I mean, you turn around, you already did 66 episodes and stuff like that, and that's a lot of content. Each, episode is at least an hour. Most of them are a little over an hour, to be quite honest. So, that's hours and hours of content. And just to give you a little peek of the inside of, kind of some analytics that's going on. I mean, on most platforms, we're at about like at least 85 to 95% consumption rate. So I want to big up to y'all for sticking in it, man. Everybody's listened to about 85-95% of all of our episodes. So that's an excellent stat, and stuff like that. So I definitely appreciate that or whatnot. But right now we don't have any questions and stuff like that. So a lot of people, they're gonna be pretty happy about this. We can go ahead and kind of actually, you know what? Let me ask you this, Brother Rod. You got anything that you wanted to cover before we jump into the topic today? Anything that you wanted to put on the people's mind real quick? Any announcements, anything like that?
Just one thing that to kind of keep in mind, and if you know your chart, which is a nice thing to have, that knowledge to understand how things affect you personally. One of the things that is kind of special that's coming up is there is a prominent stellium or a conjunction or conglomeration of planets that is going to be meeting or compiling in Capricorn. And just notice from that particular point in time how things are affecting you personally in the given area where those particular planets will conjoin. So, for example, if you are a Taurus ascendant, right, is going to conjoin in your ninth house. Um, if you are a Pisces ascendant, is going to be in your 11th house. So, find out which house is going to be in and watch and notice how much of an impact that house is going to have or that area of life is going to have, right? Going forward, right? How many things come out of that particular compilation of planets in that area? And then that's a good way to kind of bead on really the success, well, not even success, but how the year is going to unfold for you in regards to that area. So if it's, for example, the ninth house, you might find that there's a lot more concentration on spirituality, on your principles as far as what you practice. You might find yourself standing more for your principles, teaching more people about what it is that you might believe in. So those types of things, just keep notice, right? There's always something in the heavens that can show you a little something about what's going to come down the pipe here in the future. So just that major kind of conjunction, it's very rare that many planets would enter into Capricorn at once. I mean, you're talking Saturn, Jupiter, Mercury, excuse me, Saturn, Jupiter, yeah, Mercury, Venus, every planet except Mars, right, is going to be
Hmm.
there. And so it's just a good thing to notice with regards to um, how that area of life is going to pan out and what area of life that might be. The other thing to notice is that there is a Mars Saturn square coming. Um, very soon. In fact, it probably is upon us, but it's actually upon us now. So that kind of creates just some tensions and some frustrations around things. Just be careful driving. Don't overreact to things. Just be really aware and conscientious of um, how you deal with any type of contentions or challenges, because it could be explosive, it could be challenging, it could even be to the point where you may make a mistake for lack of forethought. So just some things to keep in the back of your mind as we move forward. Other than that, though, I think we can get started. We can pretty much dive right in.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Um, so with this particular episode, we've touched this, when reviewing certain charts and different things like that, right?
We have.
But we're gonna kind of double down on a topic that's sometimes can be overlooked. When you're analyzing a chart, depending on what's your background and different things like that. You might see a chart, you might see some things, and notice you got some placements in some certain houses, and you see that hey, this might be a planet that does good in this particular house, but like one of the old sayings are is maybe too much of a good thing isn't good at all or whatnot. So we're gonna dive down into that discussion today or whatnot here with episode 16 or whatnot.
Yes, indeed. So, um, kind of the first piece of the puzzle here to really unpack is what is a Karaka? The topic of today's actual conversation is a it's a technique or kind of like what we kind of gauge or look for when we see certain principles or certain placements in the chart, and it's actually called uh, Karako Bhavanashaya, right? And Karako, right, is literally Karaka. And what is a Karaka? People might have heard it before as a term. And it just basically boils down to something that it's a significator or something a planet signifies or kind of rules or governs certain things in our life. And so, for example, right, just we all know that Venus governs marriage for the most part, in the general sense of things. So when we look for, let's say, marriage in a chart, we examine Venus, right, very carefully and very intricately so that we understand what this particular Karaka or significator is doing in regards to that area. So, with Venus, we look for marriage, right?
Yeah.
Um, for career, we look for Saturn. For siblings, we look for Mars, right? For father, we look for sun, right? For mother, we look for moon, right? All these things are indications, right, or indicators of those things that are represented by the planets in our lives. So, Jupiter for children, right? Jupiter for gurus. And what I'm really pointing out to or highlighting is the actual what we call the Jiva items of a chart. So Jiva is basically living, right? It means living, it means alive. Like when we say Jiva Atma, right? The living soul, right, which is your moon. So, right, Jiva means living, and this principle really focuses more on the living aspects of a chart versus
Yeah.
the non-living, right? And so, each house, in fact, each planet is connected to a house by way of its Karaka indications. So, for example, the ascendant or the first house is connected to Jupiter and Mercury. The second house, excuse me, yeah, well, the second house is connected to Jupiter. Um, the third house, well, no, sorry, excuse me. The first house is connected to Sun as the body. The second house is Jupiter. The third house is Mars. The fourth house is Moon and Mercury. The fifth house is Jupiter. The sixth house is Saturn. The seventh house is Venus. The eighth house is Saturn again. The ninth house is the Sun. The 10th house has four particular karakas, meaning that the 10th house has a prominent role in our lives. We have Mercury, Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn, all karakas of the 10th house. Jupiter is a karaka of the 11th, and then the 12th again. It's also Saturn. Many times, Mars is also associated with the 6th house as well. So, all of these houses have a direct connection or a direct undertone with regards to that planet that has an affiliation with it or an affinity with it. So, when we
And
look at this, go ahead.
well, one thing, if you want to know the rationale behind why, hit up Brother Rod and them classes he got going on or
Yeah,
whatnot. You
definitely.
get to get the
Definitely.
details.
We just started a class last week. It's
Hmm.
hype. It's dope, right? I mean, people are really um this is, we have it every year, right? So we get new students every year. This year, people are hyped, they're focused. It's a beautiful class. It's large, a lot of people in it. We got about 15, about 12 to 15 people total. So, big up. And I want to send a special shout out to one of my students, Hatir Anuf Ra, right? Big ups to you, partner.
Oh, yeah, man. Big up to that brother. Great
Brother's
support of the
definitely
show.
doing his thing as far as his studies is concerned, and bringing people to the table and really getting the knowledge out. So definitely appreciate you, brother.
Indeed.
But with
Indeed.
regards to um, and we do cover in depth, right? What those Karakas are, the Karaka system, how they relate, and so forth. So, yeah, definitely don't miss out because it's just the beginning. If you're still interested, I might be able to get you in and at least get you caught up so we can get you, in the fold, and so you don't miss a beat. But continuing, this is a very, very interesting approach to things because what it really highlights is that when you have a particular placement in a house, you know our natural instinct is to say, oh, it's in its own house, right? It's going to do well. It should be a very auspicious placement. Well, and of course all these rules that I'm about to mention to you are modified, right? So when we talk about a planet in a particular house, we have to look at aspects, the ruler, right, of that planet, of that house. We have to look at it in Varga charts, right? We have to see if it's, remember, we talked about retrograde last time. So all
Yeah.
those things will impact what I'm about to tell you. But these are just basic bottom line rules when it comes to planets being in their own house, right? So I'm talking about, and folks might get it confused. I'm not really talking about, for example, like when a planet rules a sign and it's in that house. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, for example, if Mars is in the third house, there is a there is a challenge or an adversity with that individual and his younger or her younger siblings, right? And so when you have that, it's just overkill, right? Because the third house, right, is a house that talks about initiative and drive, right? Um, it's good for certain things when you're talking about sports, when you're talking about um, self protection, martial arts, right? Mars in the third house is an excellent placement. But when it comes to living people, right? Neighbors, right? People that live in your close vicinity, right? Colleagues, right? These are also indications of the third house. So when Mars is there, is a good chance that that energy, right? Because it becomes so potent and becomes so polarized, it becomes negative in the outcome. So the siblings receive a abrasive or a combative type energy from the individual of the chart we're looking at. The younger siblings also bring a lot of challenges, a lot of contention. So, if you ever notice in a house, the brothers or sisters or siblings, they fairly have a lot of animosity or competitiveness, right? You'll also see that amongst siblings that they will constantly be ready to compete, which is good for sports. Remember, it's not bad for it's not negative in the sense of how it plays out outside of a living being. It's
Yeah.
excellent,
Yeah.
right? But when it comes to an actual entity that takes form, right? It's not a healthy thing. It's a double whammy, right? It's too much and it's overkill, right? Now, if it's in a sign that it rules, which is either Scorpio or Aries, then you can even say more of an impact can be substantiated, right?
Mm.
Um, Again, right, these are things that you have to really modify and look at because if there's an aspect, a strong trinal aspect from Jupiter, then that means that that definitely can lighten the load with regards to that planet. So remember, Jupiter rules 1,000 evils in the chart. So his
Yeah.
aspect can create a whole lot of differences. But you also have to look to see if Saturn's aspecting too, right? Because again, that can create a whole lot of challenges, right? So, you know,
Absolutely.
that's where you use the knowledge to gauge what is this what I'm looking at here, right? Um, the next kind of thing we want to look at is, for example, Moon being in the fourth house, right? Moon being in the fourth house really is overkill with regards to the emotional disposition of an individual. Um, you really see the fourth house, it's too much mother, right? It's too much. It's overkill, right? It becomes difficult to even enjoy the relationship with the mother, right? And so a lot of times when we see this, um, you would think that it would be a devoted, loving parent, right? But it could be too loving. It could be too smothering. It could be too motherly. It could be too to the point where the person feels like they can't get out of the home. It feels almost overly protective,
Smothered.
right? Yeah. And so, it's good to have moon in the fourth, but remember this, right? Fourth house deals with satiation and satisfaction. So moon in the fourth can definitely be potent in the sense of education, right? In the sense of homes, right? excellent for home ownership, taking care of one's home, taking being a parent in one's home. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's overkill when it comes to the physical aspect because the mother, typically the mother, or the single parent, whoever that person is raised by, a lot of times will feel like they don't have a way outside of the relationship is too connective, too much. It's too strong of a bond, right?
You, something that's interesting. Donald Trump has Moon in the fourth house, debilitated with K2 sitting in there.
Exactly. And so remember, I said those placements will change,
Mm-hmm.
right? So K2 being there, let me tell you, you can take Moon out of it and just put K2 in there, and that alone, right, will change the whole apparatus with regards to the upbringing. But the Moon being there in a debilitation pattern, it's just
Mm-hmm.
it's it's too much, right? And so you can see that in that case, right, there was no mother.
Mm.
Again, even still indicating Moon in the fourth house, right, doesn't do so well. Not when it comes to the mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it just, and I'm not saying that every single placement is like that because again, you have to understand these things. Even the degrees will change this, right? If you're at 27 degrees, 28 degrees, right, that planet is going to act differently than at 15, which is considered, right, the cut in this system. 15 degrees is the cusp, right? Not 0 degrees, not 30 degrees or 29 degrees. 15 degrees is considered the cusp of a house where a planet is extremely strong in what we call Baladadi Avashta. Baladadi Avashta is a way we measure, right, the state or condition of a planet, one of the ways. And so at 15 degrees, it's extremely strong, right? Trump's is at 28 degrees. So that says a lot as well, right? His is at a lower degree, which is literally about to enter into the next house. So that changes quite a few things.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, right, the rule still applies. Now, when it comes to the fifth house, you would think because the fifth house represents children, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how could Jupiter in the planet in the house of children, which you would always want to have Jupiter guiding and governing and ruling your children? Well, think about it from this perspective, right? If you're constantly bombarding your children with knowledge instead of love, if you're constantly wanting your children to perform and exceed and shine, if you're constantly making it about them exceeding or achieving some goal instead of being about love, about concern, about nurturing, about supporting, about allowing them to grow on their own, then the child begins to feel an impact from a very distant and a very non-loving place. When
Yeah.
when you're constantly preaching to a child, you're not even berating, but just, you know, beating them up with knowledge or building them up with knowledge, either way, right? Then the child becomes resentful, and then there's a space. Another thing it also represents is that if Jupiter is in the fifth house, many times the person is about knowledge themselves, so they spend a lot of time pursuing knowledge, right? Teaching, guiding, right? Helping others, and many times this is at the cost of the child. So, right, when we
I've
begin
seen
to
that. I've seen that. Like, I know a couple,
Mhm.
married couple. Both of them have Jupiter in the fifth, and they run a like the kids are very
Well,
smart,
I,
but
I was
but
gonna
you can
say that makes them brilliant. It
yeah.
makes the children brilliant,
Hmm.
right? Well mannered, right? Overall, good kids.
Yeah,
But there's just too much.
it's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so a lot of times, right? I have it. I'll even admit
Hmm.
it, right? I have Jupiter in the fifth. and it does create somewhat of a distance to have to constantly being in that role. Um, and my children are great kids, right? They're great children. They're loving, very intelligent, very bright. But at the same time, right, there is a kind of segue, right? We spend time, but then there's times when we don't. And so it does create that kind of like, it's really, right, a double whammy. You love your children, but at the same time, you have so many other things because Jupiter in the fifth house expands. Wherever Jupiter is, it expands. So it expands your knowledge to the point where really you have a very um, all inclusive mind. But
Hmm.
again, right, that can be overwhelming to the children. And I personally take note of this, so I don't try to beat my children up with knowledge all the time. I don't try to, lay it heavy on them. We have a
Yeah,
good time. We talk about a few things and we keep it light, right?
yeah.
They'll have enough time to deal with that as they get older. And another thing is what people don't realize is when you force your spirituality on your child, it becomes they resist it, even if it's the
Yeah.
right system and if it's the right way they don't take to that. You have to
Hmm.
allow them to see the fruits of what you do, and that usually because they'll see me right casting and asking questions and doing charts, and then they ask, "What are you doing, Daddy?" and "What's that mean?" and "Who's Tahuti?" and da 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 da, right? And then right their curiosity is sparked naturally, but it's not me drilling it into them. Hey, you got a Tahuti Hitep for your IO, so you never listen. That is not the way to approach it. Most people with Jupiter in the fifth house would do that. So you have to kind of learn that, that creates a problem.
Yeah.
Um, we won't really talk about the sixth house too much because Saturn being in the sixth house actually does fairly well, right?
Hmm.
And the indications of the sixth house um, are enemies, and as far as a living person is concerned. Um, and Saturn in the sixth house, it slows your enemies down, right? That would be the one living aspect that would be beneficial to it. Of course, cousins are another aspect, pets are another aspect of the sixth house as well,
Hmm.
living wise. So you may find that pets may be a little may be affected, right, by that particular placement. Uh, Extended family, many times, right? Extended family can also be affected because of the distance, right? Because of the overall lack of interaction, right? Saturn shuts things down. Saturn makes things cold. So again, right, just understanding that that can create a double negative, or it can create a negative out of a positive.
Yeah.
The seventh house is the one I really want to cover the most, right? Because Venus in the seventh house is one that is very strange. You would think that Venus, because it's its natural house, would do very well. Not necessarily so. I've seen it many times that um,
Hitler got
it
Venus in the
basically
seventh.
you say, huh?
I said Hitler got Venus in the seventh house.
Yes, he does. He got a stellium in the seventh, right?
Yeah. Not saying everybody's Hitler. That just I remember that. Thinking about
Yeah, I mean, you can't. It's hard to forget that one, right?
it.
And they just don't
Yeah.
do well in relationships because it's too much netchum netchum, as we say, right?
Mm.
Too much sweet sweet, right? And that sweetness, right? The beauty of the wife, number one, is usually very right and exact. The person usually has a very beautiful wife, right? And you think about it, a beautiful wife you would want, but guess what? So does everybody else, right? And that wife usually knows that, right? She knows her worth. Remember Venus's value. So she understands her value and her worth and her power. So when you have Venus in the seventh, a lot of times, right, you think that it's the glue that you need to make everything go well, and it becomes the glue that literally it it binds the wife to you, but it also binds her to others. It makes her more appealing to others, and it makes you appealing as well. Venus in the seventh house makes the native, the person, actually attractive. Also, that's how they get the wife, because Venus points it looks back to the ascendant, and anything looking back to the ascendant affects the physical form, right? So the person is usually very attractive themselves, and they attract those types of individuals. But remember, all this attraction only lasts for so long, right? The beauty of a relationship is not in the initial process, it's in the long run. And that's why
Yeah.
Saturn is exalted in Libra, because it wants to teach you that beauty is only skin deep, right? So when you have Venus there, if you know people with Venus there in their charts, or if you have it, look to see, right, how your relationships are affected. Look to see if the relationships that you've had have been so great they've been too good, right? And when they say it's too good to be true, it usually is, right? So um, it doesn't always mean that, folks. Not always. I've seen people married 20 years I've seen a woman married with 20 years with Venus in the seventh house. But there was also a node there. And when the node's time ran, the relationship ended. Right. And
There's a go ahead. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. I'm listening.
No, I was saying there's somebody in particular that we touched on their chart before, but hearing you talk about it, they kind of got two of those situations in there. Princess Diana of Wales.
Hmm.
She has the moon in the
She,
fourth,
hmm.
and she also has Venus in the seventh.
That tells a lot.
Yeah,
That
and I
tells a
know
lot. And so,
a lot of what was going on with her is around her marriage, her relationship, different thing. It was rumored that she was dealing with the brother from Egypt, and different things that were
hmm.
yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. So she was married. She's married into royalty,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I mean, I'm not judging her looks because I'm not, you know, but for all intents and purposes, I mean, I guess she's pretty, for what you
The
consider
culture.
attractive, right? The culture,
Yeah.
so but look at the marriage,
Mm-hmm.
look at the marriage. It fell apart. She was unhappy, and
Mm-hmm.
you would think that, I mean, she's a prince. She's a princess. I mean, what more could you want as a woman, right? But that didn't mean she was happy. That didn't mean she was complete. I mean, Moon in the fourth, that shows that, and here's the thing, that's probably why she helped a lot of different people. They say that she really had a heart of gold, according
Mm-hmm.
to, what the conjecture is. And, that's a big part of it. But um, considering, being a princess, being royalty, I mean, that's almost, I'm gonna say every woman's dream, but a lot of women's dreams is to be at that level.
Yeah.
Um, and she didn't really care for it, not to the level of what you would think. So again,
Mm-hmm.
it really reflects back to a lot of that the opulence that comes with it, the adoration, right? The praise, doesn't mean anything to those people that have those placements, because they almost, it's like overkill. It's like, I really wish I almost didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, it shows that these particular principles can really be used and garnered if you really know how to apply them.
Yeah.
Um, the next one I want to cover is, and I want to skip the eighth house because the eighth house deals with in-laws. And Saturn being there, which is his natural house, not the Crocker of the eighth house, it really just talks a lot more about, I mean, there's really not many people that are affected physically in that case, right? The ninth house, though, is definitely one we're going to cover. And the Karaka for the ninth house is the sun. And you would think that, it's strange because you think all these planets would be, you know, awesome in their in their houses that that they represent, or they are affiliated with respectively. But
Yeah.
the sun in the ninth house, and I've seen it many times. I've seen it even in Leo, right, where the father's just not there. What
Mm.
happens is the father becomes very self-important, right? The father's own life and dealings take precedent over the child. And because the father is so magnanimous, so great. Now, if the father is in the child's life, because it happens, right? Many times this father is abusive, right? Too overbearing, right? Just like moon in the fourth, right? Sun in
Mm-hmm.
the ninth, right? Can create this distance between father and child because, you know, malefic planets are designed to create separation. The sun separates by nature, right? The sun is alone in in its existence, right? It literally causes that heat to push people away. So that heat pushes the child away. The heat pushes the siblings away, right? In fact, the person that has sun in the ninth, because they have sun in the ninth, their siblings are also affected because sun aspects the third.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is something that you really take note of because now the person themselves, they actually do quite well when it comes to living by principles, by trying to adhere to some type of spiritual system or religion. They usually gravitate or garner that as a important part of their life. So it does do well in certain regards. Remember, and Venus in the seventh does excellent for business, right? Business wise, it's a very good placement, right? It means you do well in deals, right? You know how to make a good deal, you know how to create a good connection, right? But back to Sun in the ninth, right? That Sun in the ninth can still give blessings with regards to spirituality. Now, the guru is also affected. That means that the person's teachers many times can be demanding.
Mm-hmm.
Many times the guru can be outright kingly or um, aristocratic or bossy, right? So, sun in the ninth does well when regards to like studies, things that are not alive. But any person that fulfills that role, a lot of times it comes off very frustrating.
Mm.
Um, the next one is very interesting because there's four planets for the 10th house, right? And the 10th house is a house of prominence and power. So any planet there naturally is going to promote itself above all others. In fact, the 10th house is the most powerful house in the chart. So any planet there is going to promote itself above all others. Well, planets there, like for example, let's say Venus is there, right? That means a lot of times, and it doesn't always mean you're going to be in music. It doesn't mean you're going to be in clothing. Sometimes you can be into occult knowledge. Sometimes you can be a teacher, right? Venus has various connotations in the 10th, but it doesn't harm the 10th house. The sun does, however. It's a major Karaka of the 10th,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, because the 10th house really deals with prominence, you yourself, when you have the sun in the 10th, become a natural born leader, right? Naturally. But the leadership takes on a very hot and oppressive disposition, right? It becomes downright unbearable because the person's so condescending, so demanding. And so that's where it burns. A lot of times you'll find that sun in the 10th house also will create bosses that are extremely hard on their employees, right? Um, you'll you'll find that you'll have individuals that will promote you, but will in that promotion require almost an arm and a leg for you to be able to get to the point where you want to go in that career or in that profession. So
Yeah.
it's not, it's not the greatest placement, if you will.
That
Um,
kind of brings up a question because a lot of people, when you look at, things like, if you're reading a text, directional strength, different things like that, or an exaltation or something like that, that it's not always saying that it's actually a good thing. It's just saying that, hey, this is how this planet wants to act. And when it's sitting here, it gets its full ride to act how it wants to act, for good or bad.
Good, bad, or ugly, it doesn't matter. Right. You're absolutely right in that. That's a very good point. Because Sun in the 10th house does, it's a very powerful placement. It has a lot of strength in Shadbala. But strength is one thing, quality is another, right? And Shadbala doesn't necessarily measure quality, right? It measures quantity,
Yeah.
right? So, you can have a powerful planet for good or bad, like you said, right? Very accurate, very well stated. But, when you have Sun in the 10th house, it's too much confidence, right? It's just too much. Um, you just, you're perceived as someone that is a jerk, right? In the workplace, of course, right? And so you have to tone it down. Yeah, and this is the thing, the planets impel, they don't compel. So once you have this knowledge, like I said, Jupiter in the 5th house allows me to see how not to do my children, how not to be, because I have so much access to information and knowledge. Literally, I mean, you would think that I read, you know, spiritual books with my children all the time. I don't. Right? I stay away from trying to do that so that they can naturally gravitate towards it. So I read all kind of different books with them, especially
Yeah.
my daughter. We read various things, and she gravitates towards it. So it's and she has Jupiter in the 10th. So right, she's gonna do this anyway. But nonetheless, right, she really, I can even sense her spirit almost as a silent conversation that it's appreciated because she could be right? The type of child that be like the preacher's child, right? You know what happens with preacher's kids, right? Right?
It's not, we got daughters. I don't want to talk about them.
Right. You already know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right. Um, so again, right? This is just a word to the wise. Use it wisely. Use it to where you change and modify the behavior patterns so that you can, reap the best rewards of your destiny. Um, you know, Saturn in the 10th house is a very frustrating thing as well. And it's not just frustrating for the simple fact that it's in its own natural house, but Saturn in the 10th house talks a lot about the career and how slow it can be, how frustratingly, painstakingly slow it can be, or how rigorous the career path can be, right? Doesn't always mean that it's going to be a negative outcome because, again, you have to look at the sign placements for this particular kind of outcome, right?
Yeah.
Saturn, and I swear to you, folks, it's strange, right? You see Saturn exalted in the 10th house, you think it's the world is an oyster. I've seen it so many times. Saturn in the 10th in Libra, right? The person doesn't even scratch the surface. They don't even get started on a career many times. And so it just means that, that aspect of that person's life is where they pay dues, right? Saturn makes you pay your dues. So, if the person's not doesn't hold resentment back, doesn't feel like, the world is against me and really pays the price to climb whatever ladder they're climbing, they do very well because in the end they've built a very strong foundation. But also consider when you think about supervisors, bosses, people that are living entities that are represented by that house, then you're actually looking at a very cruel supervisor, a very mean entity that is over you. You feel the pressure, you feel the coldness, you feel the lack of appreciation, right? And that can be hard in anyone trying to make a name and fame for themselves. So this
Yeah.
is again showing that there's some blockages that you feel, and um you feel isolated as well, right? Like there's no one there to support you. That is a very frustrating placement, right? Again, these things impel, they don't compel. So you can use these things to garner, right? And understand, hey, I don't have to necessarily succumb to feelings of resentment. When I am paying my dues, I can pay my dues and be at peace.
Yeah.
And then you'll
Yeah.
watch the magic, and then they say, "Oh, you know what? You've done a job well done. We put you through this. Now here's your reward." Right? Because Saturn doesn't deny; he delays. Right? Um, the other one, and here's the strange thing, right? It's that Jupiter in the 10th house is a weird one as well, and it's almost similar to the Sun, but not quite. Right? Of course, it's not as belligerent or dogmatic or downright just um, emotionally searing as the sun, but it can be overly expansive. Right? You can sometimes have too many things that you want to do, right, and then do nothing. Many times Jupiter in the 10th can they'll wait, right, because you'll notice that Jupiter in the 10th aspects the fourth, which boosts the educational process. But the educational process then becomes one where many times a person can have more access to things to do, and then it's too much.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're trying to really, for example, let's say you want to get into law, right? Jupiter is not a bad placement, but you also have to see its relationship and its ruler to other particular houses that represent the same thing. So Jupiter is like one of the, of course, Mercury is also one of the planets you have to take in consideration. Well, Mercury is probably the least affected as far as the principle is concerned. It just means that you could be overly expressive and communicative and explain more than you should in that area. It could mean that your supervisors are taskmasters, not in the sense of taskmasters like Saturn, but just making sure every I is dotted, T is crossed, perfection type manager, right? Type of entity that is dealing with you. That
Yeah.
again is frustrating, right? I don't know if you've ever met somebody that just every single thing has to be right before they execute. That's the type of person. So it's less impactful, right, than the others, but again, it creates some type of irritation in that particular area as well. Now, you'll find that most other houses do well, right? Even with the principal, Jupiter in the 11th really does fairly well, right? The elder sibling, which is what the 11th house represents, usually is of assistance to some degree, but also the elder sibling can at times be a little parental, right, if you will, or a little father like, because Jupiter has some of that affinity with the 11th house. And you will find that the elder sibling can do very well, even support, but also be kind of like the head of the family.
Yeah.
Not a bad
Yeah.
thing, because I said Jupiter in the 11th is probably the one I would say is the, out of all of them, is probably the best placement. The 12th house, you don't really have to deal with so much because it's people that are unseen in your life, hidden
Yeah.
enemies, ancestors, people that are that predate you. So again, right, it's not something, but the other houses that we've mentioned, primarily the third, fourth, fifth, seventh, ninth, and 10th houses are the ones really where this particular principle counts the most. And again, always take into consideration all factors. We never read the chart from one factor, not even two, not even three. We read hundreds of factors to get a real consensus of what's going on, even with just singular placements, because everything's interconnected.
Yeah.
So, you know, take it with a grain of salt, right? Take it with a sugar pill, whatever you want to call it, and then then apply it, right? Because these rules are written thousands of years ago, folks. We live in a much different world and a much different society, and so some of these things, right, might play out a little differently. Considering, for example, right, in ancient times, if you have Venus in the seventh house, you were probably even more beautiful, for the simple fact that A lot of makeup wasn't around back then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Natural beauty, right? Um, you didn't have divorce like you have, right?
Yeah.
So adultery, right, was something that was even more cursed than it is now, because that was considered, a sacrilegious sin to be caught, right, in an
Mm-hmm.
adulterous relationship. So you take these things and you apply them, because you have to understand what's being stated was stated some thousands of years ago, and it still holds true, but there always has to be some adjustment per the culture, right? And so, with that being said, right, that pretty much covers that principle. And if you have any questions, definitely chime them in, and let us know, so that in the next particular opportunity we have to come on, we can at least shoot your kite out, and maybe address what it is that you might want to know.
Absolutely, absolutely. And with that being said, this episode was brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group, Karako Astrology, and our good people over there on Patreon. Or whatnot. So once again, I always thank the patrons for all that they do. And we're doing this live right now. And we're at some point we're gonna release these live ones to the public. So we're gonna be doing some different things. So all the people on Patreon, hit us up and give us some ideas and stuff like that or whatnot, and we'll pivot from there and whatnot. But I think this is a nice, good, concise episode or whatnot. These are very fundamental principles to look at. I'm definitely always looking to try to apply these things, because it's just different things that you may not see. You may look at it and look and think it's looks good on this way, but then you dig further and stuff like that. What they say, the devil's in the details, right? So indeed. So I'm definitely appreciative of that. Brother Rod, you got anything else you want to say before we get up out of here?
No, just like I said, if you're interested in classes, they've just begun. We're still in the first class. We really haven't dived into any astrological principles as of yet. We will be very soon, but if you're interested, let me know, right? And we will get you in and get you started.
Indeed, indeed. And with that being said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and we will be back next week, same time, same place, with another great episode. Everybody be safe out there, and we're out. Peace.